Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
So anybody here that is a fan of comic books or comic book movies will know that a good author never allows a good villain to just disappear. You can't do that because you spend time developing a character. You place them within the narrative of the heroes. And then if you have the heroes just defeat them, well, what's next? A new villain? Villain of the week? No, you need to have your Doc Octopus to come back again and again to challenge Spider-Man and have new things. You have to have all of those villains coming back over and over. There have to be victories, but they have to recur. And in Judaism, we have a few instances of this as well. The most famous, of course, is the character of Amalek, the tribe of the Amalekites that attacked us as we left Egypt, which occur throughout the early books of the Tanakh, repeatedly, coming back again during the time of the conquest, coming back again during the time of King David, Saul and then King David, and then, of course, most famously coming back in a special cameo appearance in the story of Purim, in the story of Esther, as Haman was the last vicious member of those people. But the other, perhaps less well known, but perhaps more important character who has a recurring villain role in Judaism is, of course, our brother Esau. Esau is there, obviously, throughout Jacob's life, but at the end of this week's Torah portion, he kind of drifts off into history, and you might think that that's the end of him. But wait, there's more. He absolutely comes back, but the problem here is that there has been a name change that if you haven't been reading your Torah portion carefully, shame on you, but if you haven't been reading it carefully, you might have missed. Because he goes off to live in a place called Mount Seir, and Mount Seir is in an area that we now call Jordan, and this is the territory of what we would know as the Edomites, Edom. Now, Edom becomes a neighbor to the state of Israel during its many incarnations. And Edom is often an adversary. Sometimes there is a cold peace, but more often there are hot conflicts going back and forth. And so this is why the Haftarah, which we'll hear tomorrow, specifically chastises the Edomites for being part of the gang assault on Jerusalem when the Babylonians began to sack her. That the Edomites joined in the pillaging. They were there again, and of course Obadiah, the prophet, is going to talk about the reward they get for behaving in such a way. But they are considered to be the descendants of Esau, and they are considered to be his character descendants as well. Impulsive, self-reliant to a fault in the sense of believing arrogantly that they can handle any problem that they might have from their fortress in Mount Seir, and of course extremely greedy and looking out for themselves as number one. But the Edomites disappear during the time of the Babylonians, and by the time of the Persian Restoration, we no longer have the Edomites around. Or do we? Because now they are sort of still there. In fact, they are there during the time of the Maccabees, which again, if you haven't read through the book of Maccabees and the subsequent eras of their time, then you might not realize this, but the area, just that same area, just to the south and southeast of Israel, is still Edomite territory, and they get conquered by Israel once and for all. And in one of our most disgraceful episodes in Jewish history, we forcibly convert the Edomites to become Jewish. This is the only case where we see forceful conversion as part of Jewish history. The king who did this was roundly chastised and is not considered to have done anything good in Jewish history. This is not set as an example, but it happened. Oh, but that should be the end of it, right? No, because who comes out of this forceful conversion area of the Edomites that is going to play a major role in history?
Rome.
Well, first, before we get to Rome,
The Greeks.
No, sorry, I thought we were going to somewhere else.
So, is it Herod's father?
Herod,
Herod.
right?
Oh.
King Herod is an Edomian, which is the version from the other languages around us of Edom. right? He is an Edomian. He is from Edom. He is a descendant of Esau, and he gets put in place by the Romans as their puppet king for our kingdom once we have become part of the Roman Empire. And so the circle comes back around. Here is King Herod now causing much pain and suffering to the Jewish people. According to tradition, he tried to hunt down and kill all of the rabbis. I'm still a little bitter about that. Even though he is famous for his restoration of the temple, which was done in contrition, he is not considered a good king at all. And he is one of the people that helped hasten the destruction of that second temple by his corruption, by his venality, by his propensity to violence, which extended to his own family. He killed not only his wife, but many of his children and many other people as well. Not a nice guy. And so we can see that he is not exactly Esau, but he is still living in that character of Esau. That Esau's spirit, if you want, is still there. Not in a literal sense, but he is still following those tendencies. Impulsiveness, selfishness, violence as a solution for problems. This is still Esau, and now he's in charge of us. Not so great. But that's the last we hear of Edom then, right? Because after all, with the fall of Israel and the Edomites going as well, when we'd conquered them, then now they are gone. Well, no, of course not. Because a good villain is not something you want to waste. And so our rabbis flicked through the Torah and they said, what exactly was it that Isaac promised Esau? He promised them this very special piece of land. And, well, the place that we think is most special in that particular description, well, that's the southern tip of that little peninsula out in the Mediterranean, otherwise known as Italy. And so the rabbis began to say, it could be that the Edomites ended up also in Italy and founded the city of Rome. And that Rome is actually the continuation of Esau yet again. After all, they share a lot in common. They are greedy, as evidenced not only by their horrible conquest of the known world at the time, but also by their extremely punitive taxes and extractive commercial policies, which impoverished our people time and time again. They are prone to violence. We don't need much evidence of that. We can see all of the places that they have destroyed and taken all of the thousands and hundreds of thousands dead at the hands of their legions. We can look at the barbarity with which they persecuted us. That really seems in keeping with Esau. And they also tended to be rather impulsive. I know we always think of Romans as being very strategic. They were more impulsive than they are often given credit for. It's just that their massive legions tended to win out even when they blundered into bad situations. And so we ended up with Rome continuing in rabbinic literature to be called Edom, to be called the children of Esau. And Rome, alive and well, we could criticize them under the cover language of talking about Esau. But then, of course, Rome is gone. The Roman Empire eventually falls, especially in the west, although it continues in Constantinople in the east for much longer. So that means it's the end of Edom. Esau's lineage is finally gone, correct?
No.
No! Because who did the rabbis in their analysis find are behaving the same way? Christian Europe. Christian Europe is behaving also in a bloodthirsty way with crusades, inquisitions, and many other forms of persecution. They are extremely impulsive, behaving and believing all sorts of things that we find rather untenable. And they, of course, continue to afflict us in the same way that Esau had always promised he would afflict his brother Jacob. And so Christian Europe becomes Edom in the eyes of much of rabbinic literature. And again, it makes it a convenient way for us to talk about them behind their back without ending up burning at a stake. So it was a handy literary device. But of course, Christian Europe in that form is gone, which means that Edom is gone. Finally, Esau is gone once and for all. Well, we could continue to play Who's Esau Today? but I would like to advance a slightly different idea, which is that the rabbis also recognized that as much as we try to establish who is Edom, who is behaving like Esau in different generations, that we are sometimes blind to the fact that Esau, being our twin, being our brother, is also found within us. That we also carry Esau with us. That sometimes we behave violently, impulsively. Sometimes we are greedy and selfish. And when we do so, we are continuing the legacy of Esau through our own actions. It is prosaic to blame the enemy, the other, the one that has oppressed us, sometimes obviously and worthy of blame. But it is much more meaningful and much more important to recognize the problems within ourselves of how we sometimes carry on Esau's legacy, even as we rail against those around us who do so as well. We must not be blind to the problems within ourselves, as long as we are also willing to criticize those out around us. Esau and Jacob, the struggle continues, and we will have more to say about that tomorrow. Shabbat Shalom.